Alright everyone, so this is something new that I want to do in 2026. As far back as my first Wings of Fire is D&D video, I've talked about wanting to write out some of the stories referenced in that universe. My goals for this year were to start posting shorts, which I already have, and finally get around to sharing some of those stories. So I've got all 3 videos worth of character timelines sorted into one huge spreadsheet, and today I want to share the first of many D&D stories. The Adventures of the Traveling Torches, or Winter and Keebly. In case anyone needs some refreshing on these guys and their backstories, I did repost their backstories as shorts over the last couple of days. So feel free to head over to my channel and check those out if you need a refresher, or if you've never seen the original D&D video I did. If you notice any little details that don't line up, no you didn't. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy this story. These two are still 2 of my favorite D&D adaptations that I've done. The first weeks Winter spent in Spine City were a bit of a blur in his memory. Spine City was the northernmost city in the desert, the first place Winter had come upon after being exiled from the Kingdom of Ice. At the time, still healing from the injuries he'd gained during the bandit attack that had cost Winter everything, he hadn't cared where he was. He'd been heartbroken for his brother, for the life he'd so unexpectedly lost. He'd only traveled from the Kingdom of Ice a few times before in his life, and now Winter was staring exile in the face. Spine City wasn't much to be impressed with. As Winter was learning, the desert had long been fractured into a dozen warring factions, with different cities being controlled by warlords, supposed royals, gangs, and whoever could wrest control into their talons and keep it. He didn't know how the other cities were, but Spine City had been conquered by the Onyx Warlord only 2 years ago. He could still see the scars of that battle. Buildings burned and blackened, stone cracked or crumbling, piles of rubble nobody could be bothered to clear. Her guards, if they could be called that, swarmed through the city daily, extorting other dragons, causing fights, and answering to nobody. Winter wasn't the only Icewing in this city, and there were plenty of other travelers who'd come to stay for one reason or another. He still stood out, but after the first week of his stay, when he'd beaten 3 guards at once after they attacked him in the street, nobody had given Winter much trouble. So he spent the first month or so of his exile in Spine City, letting his injuries heal and adjusting to his new life. Winter was cut adrift, a ship unmoored from its dock in a storm. He'd trained all his life to be a paladin, to swear his oaths to the throne and his tribe. And yet all it took was one bad day to lose everything. His brother, his future, even his home. Winter had a lot of time on his talons these days. Time to think, to reflect on what he'd done wrong and what he would do now. Mostly his thoughts ran in the same tired track. It's over, and now I can never go home. How could he honor his vows to the crown when Queen Glacier would have nothing to do with him anymore? But then Winter realized he'd sworn to more than Queen Glacier. Every Icewing Paladin swore loyalty to the crown, of course, but the vows were broader than that. He'd promised, too, to serve his tribe, to fight for them, to die for them, to take care of them. He hadn't quite made sense of his thoughts when it happened. Winter was at a tavern, waiting near the back hall. Lurking, Hailstorm's ghost teased in his ear, and Winter snorted in annoyance. A new caravan had made it to town today, and with the travelers came news. Winter couldn't care less about most of the news that came into his city, but he had to be smart. He was alone, without the protection of the Icewing Court or his fellow paladins. To be ignorant was to invite injury. But tonight, Winter would hear something important after 5 weeks of exile. He never spoke to the travelers. A few times he'd been approached by other Icewings looking for news of home, but Winter felt shameful speaking to them. It wasn't right. As much as he longed for his tribe, he was in exile. Winter didn't deserve to speak to other Icewings, even if they weren't in the Kingdom of Ice. However, as he skulked by the wall, listening to the chatter, a particular thread of storytelling caught his attention. Huge scars over his eye, in an X. The dragon, a tawny little sandwing, was saying, "I've never seen a scar like it." "Ugh," her companion shuddered. Could he see? The tawny sandwing laughed grimly. The way he was fighting Thorn's guards? "Yes, I imagine so," she said. "I can't believe she's still mopping them up even after a year." "Well, you know the den. It's a cesspit," the traveler said, voice turning disdainful now. "Anyways, I'll be on the lookout for him next time I go to Kosa. He looked a fierce one." Kosa. Winter latched hungrily onto the name. He recognized it. A tattered map hung in a place of honor next to the bar at the front of the tavern. Maps, he was learning, were a precious commodity in the Kingdom of Sand. Thanks to their ever-changing borders and leaders, finding an up-to-date map was nearly impossible. He'd seen the newcomers update this one carefully, scratching out the name over a small settlement and carefully inking a new one. Winter had seen the name Kosa on it before. Now he drifted over to the map, looking for it again. Kosa, southeast of Spine City. If this map was to scale, it looked to be a 5 or 6 day flight. Winter darted a look back at the tawny sandwing and her friend, then made for the door. He knew the dragon they were talking about, the sandwing with the X scar over one eye. He was one of the bandits who'd attacked their party as they traveled, just over a month ago. They'd never found Hailstorm's body. His brother would never even get an honorable burial. If there was nothing else Winter could do, he could do that for his brother. He would find out what had happened to his brother after he died. Hailstorm wouldn't be forgotten. And if those wretched bandits had dishonored his body, Winter would have his revenge on all of them. Starting with this scarred sandwing when he found him. Kosa was a bigger city than Spine City. It was louder, more colorful, and better organized. The Onyx Warlord had apparently had control of it for 8 years, which Winter was learning was a small eternity in the desert. The somewhat stable, if authoritarian, leadership meant Kosa was in better condition than Spine City, or the 2 villages Winter had bypassed on his flight here. Unfortunately, he had to put his search for the scarred sandwing on the back burner for a while. He needed money. Winter had sold some of his jewelry when he'd first arrived at Spine City, and the rest had followed before long. But he wouldn't part with his armor or sword. They were as integral to his paladin oaths as he was. So in the meantime, if he wanted lodging in the city, he needed work. Winter had intended to find work as a guard, perhaps, given there wasn't much need for his skills in a peaceable enough city, but he quickly discovered that absolutely nobody, not even a tavern looking for a bouncer, wanted to hire a foreigner as a guard, for fear of spies or thieves. He'd begun to despair that he'd never find work, when he ran into a mudwing named Quake. Or rather, he ran into the 3 dragons chasing him. They'd evidently been looking to steal the fine gold necklace the mudwing had in a small silken pouch. Winter, in a foul mood from a day spent finding neither a job nor the scarred sandwing, had beaten them off easily enough. Quake, impressed with his skill with the sword, had asked if he would be willing to teach others. And so, somehow, Winter found himself hired as a swordmaster, of all things, teaching new recruits for the Onyx Warlord. Quake had explained that he worked under one of her commanders to find and train recruits. Winter's old masters would have snorted at the idea of him teaching anyone, but as far as jobs went in this wretched city, it was a decent one. Also, it gave Winter a first-row seat to any rumors or gossip about strangers or enemies of the Warlord. What better way to find his target? Other than searching the streets for him, asking around, which occupied Winter's evenings. It was around that time that he first met Keebley. Winter was lying in one of the few patches of shade in this god's-forsaken desert, in the courtyard where he trained the new recruits. He was done for the day, but it was still abysmally hot, and he couldn't drag himself back to his feet for his evening of searching until the sun dipped low enough to hide behind the city walls. so he had a front row seat to watch the guards dragging in a lean, scrappy-looking sandwing. "Hey," the sandwing was protesting, wings flailing as they chivied him along. "Guys, this is really just a misunderstanding. I've never met that guy before in my life. I have no idea what he's talking about." The stream of chatter was unfailing, even when one of the guards kicked him to the ground, standing over him with wings flared, while the other stomped inside, presumably to summon a commanding officer. Winter watched impassively as Arroyo, one of the captains, followed the guard outside. A loud argument ensued, the guards claiming their captive had been recognized by someone in the street who'd accused him of being a follower of a dragon named Thorn. The name was unfamiliar to Winter. He didn't really care. He heard the accusation spy thrown around, followed by loud, indignant denials. Arroyo seemed increasingly bored with the whole incident, and Winter supposed nothing would come of it. He looked up at the sky. The sun had nearly disappeared beneath the edge of the city walls, and the shadows were lengthening. He'd better get to it. He had a few more inns to visit tonight, and then he might start investigating weapons merchants if nothing turned up at the eating houses. He stalked out of the keep, nodding in farewell to the gate guard, and set off on his way. It wasn't until a few minutes later that the sandwing trotted up behind him, grinning unrepentantly. "Hey," he said, "I'm Keebly." Winter grunted and turned down a different street, trying to remember where he was going. He hadn't yet been here 2 weeks. "Where are you from?" The annoying sandwing, Keebly, was following him. "It's just, we don't see a lot of ice wings down here, you know? What were you doing in the keep?" Winter continued ignoring him. Okay, I get it. Nobody wants to talk to the dirty but clever, stunningly handsome street urchin. That's fine. I'm used to it. Hey, I see something shiny. I'll see you later." Winter couldn't help but stare after the odd dragon as he bounded away, intent on a pair of skywings walking nearby. They were wearing an entirely foolish amount of jewelry. As Winter watched, Keebly deftly stole 2 necklaces, disguising his grab with a fake trip and some tricky sleight of talon. He flowed past the sandwings like water, glittering gold vanishing into a pouch tied around his wrist easily. And then, to Winter's shock, he turned around and winked at him before disappearing around a corner. For a minute, muscle memory had Winter tensing to chase him down. Then he remembered where he was, not the Ice Kingdom, and that gave him pause. If he spent the time it would take to follow him, he might not have time to search the last of the inns tonight. So Winter huffed unhappily and turned to go on his way, trying to put the aggravating dragon from his mind. Unfortunately, after that, he was seeing Keebly everywhere. Winter didn't know what he actually did with himself, if he just wandered around the city dodging guards and stealing and being generally incorrigible, or if he actually was a spy with the most annoying cover ever. Or if he was some kind of demon, granted physical form so he could torment Winter specifically. And the worst, the absolute worst part of the entire affair was that horribly, inexorably, Winter found that he was beginning to care about Keebly. He knew this because when he came on him getting attacked by 3 dragons at the end of another fruitless night of searching, Winter didn't even realize he was fighting them off until he already had. Keebly, who was laying on the ground panting, didn't bother to get up. He was a dirty street vagrant, just in general, but he was covered in dust and blood now and looked particularly pathetic. Winter was going to blame that impression for why he didn't just walk away, now that he'd kept the idiot from getting murdered in an alley. "Thanks," Keebly managed eventually. "That was excellent of you, really, very chivalrous." Oh, right. Keebly was the most annoying dragon Winter had ever met. Winter turned around and walked away, wondering, for one horrible second, if he needed to relocate to an entirely different city. "Hey," Keebly said, without introduction or preamble, appearing at Winter's side like a malevolent ghost. Winter did not jump. Moons, how was he so sneaky? "You ran away before I could really thank you the other day," he continued blithely. He had a gash over one eye that had not been there the night before when those dragons had been attacking him. Winter blinked. "You said thank you," he said, instead of, "How did you manage to get in another fight in less than a day?" Keebly stopped, then turned to beam at him. "Hey, you talk! I knew it!" Winter flared his wings. Keebly continued, talking hurriedly. "I mean, I knew you could," he said. "And anyways, I didn't actually come to tease you today." That implied that at least some of the other times Keebly had sought Winter out with the express intent to tease him. "I heard you're looking for someone," Keebly said, tone more serious than Winter had yet heard from him. Winter didn't say anything, curious what Keebly wanted to tell him. "Scars like this?" Keebly crossed his claws over his left eye, the one that wasn't newly injured. "Yes," Winter said, suddenly interested in the conversation. "Do you know where he is?" Keebly frowned, lowering his claws. "His name's Hyena," he said. "You don't want to find him." Winter scowled. "You don't know what I want," he argued. "Why?" Keebly asked. "Why are you trying to find him? He owe you money or something?" "Or something," Winter muttered darkly. "I just think you should be careful," Keebly said, shrugging. "Hate for my gallant rescuer to end up face down in a sand dune." Winter side-eyed him flatly. He grunted. Hyena. That was one of the bandits he was looking for. Instead of taking the hint and leaving, Keebly hovered for a while, making inane small talk, seemingly unconcerned that he was, essentially, having a conversation with himself. Winter took the chance to observe him subtly, taking in the details of the dragon who'd been haunting him for a week. The sandwing was lean and never still. He fidgeted constantly, wings flicking, shifting on his talons. His dark eyes darted around the room, taking in everything without cease. There was that cut over his eye, too clean to be claws, so probably a blade of some kind, and the older injuries from the fight last night. Was he favoring one of his legs? "Why were those 3 dragons attacking you?" Winter blurted, without meaning to. He'd interrupted Keebly mid-commentary. Keebly paused, gaze flicking to him. "Oh," he said after a moment. I don't know, I guess they were mad at me?" "What'd you do?" Winter asked, raising an eyebrow. "How mad does someone have to be to gang up on you in an alley and attempt to bash your head in?" Keebly shrugged expressively, rolling his neck to look away. "Maybe they felt insecure sharing a city with someone as clever, interesting, and dashing as me." "Maybe they talked to you," Winter bit back, rolling his eyes. Keebly snorted a surprised-sounding laugh. "Was that a joke?" he asked, tone excited. "Was that humor?" "Impossible," Winter said, ironing his tone flat. "It was a completely reasonable, honest conclusion to come to." Keebly laughed, incredulously. Winter didn't see anything of the sandwing for a few days. Wondered if maybe he'd gotten arrested, or if he'd found someone new to annoy. He wasn't having any luck with his search. Even though he had a name to ask about now, nobody seemed to know where this Hyena was. Was Winter in the wrong city? Maybe he needed to find Keebly, ask a little more insistently what he knew about the scarred sandwing. It was, of course, in his nature to disappear as soon as Winter decided he might be useful for something. A month after Winter had arrived in Kosa, he ran into Keebly again. This time, he was honest to God's getting drowned. In the desert. 2 dragons, a huge mudwing and a lithe sandwing, were holding a thrashing someone in a water trough, struggling to keep their snout underwater consistently. Winter supposed they doubted anyone out at this hour would care. He'd been unable to sleep, plagued by memories of his brother, so he'd gone for a walk. "Grab his wing," the mudwing hissed, scrabbling to keep his victim's venomous tail away from his scales, while nearly sitting on him. "I'm trying," the other snapped back, and Winter drew his sword. This never happened in the Kingdom of Ice, he thought sourly, as he bounded forward and attacked the sandwing. She howled when his sword bit into her shoulder, whirling to tackle him, venomous tail arching. She was unexpectedly fast, and it took Winter longer than he liked to chase her off. Her partner, the Mudwing, was rolling around with the Sandwing they'd been drowning, who'd evidently taken advantage of the help to heave himself from the water trough so he could breathe. It was Keebly. 3 moons. The Mudwing turned and ran, not long after his companion did, encouraged by the bite of Winter's blade. He left Keebly, dripping wet and spraying water, as he panted for breath. "What under the stars was that?" Winter demanded, stomping over and rolling Keebly onto his stomach so he could hack up the water properly. "Some old friends," Keebly rasped, cracking an eye open. He fumbled around in the dirt, talons finding a wicked-looking knife he tucked away. He must have lost it in whatever fight preceded the attempted drowning. "Ugh," he moaned, shaking out his wings. "Are you actually a spy?" Winter demanded. "You're not that obnoxious. Why have dragons tried to kill you twice in the last fortnight?" Keebly beamed up at him from the ground, eyes slightly unfocused. "You think I'm not that obnoxious?" he asked happily. 3 moons, Winter cursed. Why was this his life? 2 months ago he was a royal paladin, and now here he was in the middle of the night in this god's-forsaken Sandwing hellhole, upset because 2 dragons he didn't know nearly drowned a dragon he barely knew. "I'm not a spy," Keebly said, sounding like he was telling the truth, but maybe not all of it. "I'm just..." He coughed wetly, shaking out his wings. "I guess I'm just... actually kinda a hugely unpopular guy," he admitted. Winter frowned. "Where have you been staying?" he asked. Keebly hedged. "I've been moving around a lot." "So where is it you've been hiding out the last few days?" Keebly winced. "Oh, you noticed that, huh?" Winter glared. "I don't know how unintelligent you think I am," he said frostily. "But yes, I noticed." "See," Keebly cringed. "I'm unpopular." 3 moons, Winter said, tipping his snout to the sky and praying for patience. "Just... if I walk away right now, am I going to come back tomorrow and find your cooling corpse?" "Nope," Keebly said quickly. Nope, definitely not. I am going to find a much better hiding place after tonight." Winter eyed him suspiciously. Keebly hauled himself to his feet, shaking out his wings, licking drops of cold water everywhere. He looked bedraggled and exhausted, though his impromptu dunking meant he was cleaner than usual. "I'll be all right," Keebly assured him. "Besides, you keep showing up to rescue me anyways," he added. Winter's gaze flicked unbidden to the mostly healed gash above his eye. Maybe he'd gotten lucky twice, Winter appearing when Keebly needed him, but he wasn't around all the time. Keebly was in some kind of trouble, but he seemed determined to treat it lightly. Winter huffed. "Please try to survive the night," he bit out. "I need sleep." Winter did, finally, find Hyena. It just didn't happen the way he'd expected. He was sitting with Keebly, allowing himself to be distracted from his mission by street vendor roasted lizard, which Keebly was trying to persuade him was worth eating. Winter remained unconvinced. It happened suddenly. Winter felt the unnatural pressure at the back of his mind that meant someone was trying to use magic on him. And then he couldn't move. Keebly didn't realize Winter had been magically attacked right away. Perhaps, though, he was distracted by being physically attacked. The Sandwing who belled into Keebly, knocking him clear into the middle of the street, was half his size again and moved with easy, trained efficiency. Keebly's eyes were wide with panic as the attacker clawed at his underbelly. Other dragons in the street shouted, scrambling to get away from the fight spilling into the road. Then, Keebly twisted under him, springing to the side, and when the attacker turned to give chase, Winter recognized him. It was Hyena, just as vicious-looking as Winter remembered. Winter strained against the spell, pushing at it furiously with his mind. He refused to sit and watch helplessly as Hyena killed another dragon he cared about. Keebly was holding his own. He had that slim knife out again, appearing from, seemingly, nowhere. He moved fast, with none of that distracting chatter for once. Winter suspected he was witnessing, for the first time, Keebly truly focused. But it wasn't going to be enough if Winter couldn't break through the holding spell. The fight lasted, perhaps, half a minute, but it felt like a small eternity as Winter writhed under the hostile magic. Keebly, one wing bleeding from a long set of gashes, tried to loop behind Hyena and get at his neck, behind his horns. The other sandwing turned fast, though, and batted Keebly out of the air like a misbehaving dragonette. Heavy, sharp talons slammed into Keebly, and he was pinned on the ground, panting heavily. "Traitorous whelp," the sandwing rumbled, digging his claws into Keebly's underbelly. The sandwing squirmed, growling. "Oh, please," he hissed, angrier than Winter had ever heard. "Get over yourselves." 8 of our finest missing in the last 2 months, Hyena added, voice dark. "I knew you couldn't be killing them on your own, you pathetic little sand rat." Keebly snarled, smoke leaking from his mouth as he inhaled to breathe fire at his attacker. Hyena shifted, smacking his snout to the side with a talon and keeping it there. Keebly struggled, tail lashing. "Running all the way to Kosa," Hyena added, tone mocking. Keebly growled at him. Winter paused in his efforts to break through the spell, realizing Keebly knew Hyena. And whatever grievance the two had, it sounded immensely personal. "I'll bring your head to Vulture in a sack, brat. You're just lucky I don't want to deal with you long enough to collect the reward for bringing you in alive." Keebly shuddered under the sandwing's heavy talons. "I have many charms," Winter could imagine him quipping back. Hyena was saying something else, but Winter was distracted. Finally! He got his mental claws into a crack in the spell, immobilizing him. It'd been almost a minute since it was cast, and unless Hyena was much more powerful than he looked, it couldn't hold on much longer regardless. But seconds mattered in fights. He shredded through the spell, finally, and leapt for Hyena, sword drawn in a flash. They rolled, and Winter landed on top, hacking at the sandwing with his blade. "What the... you?" Hyena demanded, face twisting in shock when he saw Winter. "Me," Winter agreed savagely, twisting to bash the pommel of his sword into Hyena's snout. He howled in pain, and then they were fighting too fast for Winter to think. It was all just instinct, sense memory he drilled into his body for years. Keebly was picking himself up in the street, casting about for his own weapons. Hyena landed a blow to Winter's side that echoed through his ribs, but Winter didn't allow himself to be distracted. He made a sweeping cut that sliced into the edge of one of his wings, and Hyena howled in pain. Winter felt grim satisfaction bleed into him. A hit like that meant even if Hyena won this fight, he'd never fly correctly again. But Hyena wasn't winning. Winter, in a focused fight against a single opponent, was very dangerous. He ground Hyena's defenses down until he had him frozen, limbs shaking, with Winter's blade under his jaw. Winter paused for a moment, holding his position. He needed to disarm Hyena and question him. Hyena snarled, lunging to the side, careless of the long wound Winter opened in his neck as he moved. Winter turned to block, but he already knew he'd be too slow. Then Keebly appeared behind Hyena, flanking him as he sprang on his back. With a quick jerk, he sliced under Hyena's neck with one of his knives, opening the cut Winter had already made the rest of the way. Hyena dropped with a gurgle, wings twitching as his eyes widened, and blood pooled. "Bring that to Vulture," Keebly hissed poisonously, stepping over the body. Winter stared at him for a moment, then shook himself. "Keebly," he shouted, teeth bared. "I needed him alive!" Keebly flinched, turning to stare at Winter incredulously. "Why, so we could cast another spell on you?" he demanded. "Or maybe so we could claw out one of your eyes." Winter exhaled hard enough that freezing breath steamed in the air. "I had questions for him," he snarled. "I needed to know who he worked for." Keebly rolled his eyes. "Well, I can tell you that," he said. "Now that he's not trying to kill me." "And that too," Winter added, unable to stop himself. "You're not just unpopular," he sneered. "Someone's trying to kill you." Keebly looked at Winter flatly. Ugh, okay, he sighed, sounding begrudging. Look, just stop yelling, okay? I'll explain. Winter's tail lashed. You better, he said. Keebly winced, looking at Hyena's body, and then the empty street around them. But maybe, he said, we should get out of here first. That's the only smart thing I've ever heard you say, Winter mumbled, wiping his sword clean on Hyena's body and resheathing it. Okay, Keebly said, talons folding together. So, I may not be a spy for Thorn, but she did send me here. Who? Winter asked. Keebly paused incredulously. You don't know who Thorn is? He asked. Winter scowled. I can't be expected to keep up with your pithy sandwing politics. Okay, well, she's the best, Keebly said with an eye roll. She's the leader of the Scorpion Den right now. He paused at Winter's expectant look and added, Another city, south of here. Then why aren't you there if she's so wonderful? Winter asked expectantly. Well, Keebly hedged, she only gained full control a year ago. Before, it was run by a dragon named Vulture who led the Talons of Power. Ooh, scary, Winter scoffed. Keebly fixed him with a flat stare. Make fun of him all you want, he said. He was. Anyways, I guess I sort of used to work for him, he winced. But not because I wanted to. Anyways, I met Thorn and I helped her defeat him. I gave her information on him. May have poisoned his drink once or twice. Well, we chased him out of the den, but he took over Zeros, a smaller city. I was working in the den with Thorn, but he kept sending assassins after me. Everyone worked for him there. It was impossible to screen everyone. So Thorn sent me here until things calmed down a little. He rubbed at the back of his head sheepishly. I guess it's not working very well. I probably need to relocate again. He said relocate the way some dragons said rotting fish in my bedroll. That's who Hyena worked for, Keebly shrugged. Vulture. Was a wizard assassin. Part of why he was so hard to fight. Winter huffed, chewing on the new information. So, unpopular was an understatement, he said finally. Keebly laughed dryly. You could say that, he admitted. Enemy number one would be more accurate, I guess. But what about you? Why isn't Icewing looking for Hyena? He recognized you. Winter swallowed, looking away. He hadn't actually told anyone the story. The other survivors had told Queen Glacier plenty, and Winter hadn't felt capable of defending himself against the accusations thrown his way. There were no excuses. Hailstorm died, and Winter didn't stop it. The least he could have done was die with his brother. Instead, he was in the desert, trying to find his killers. He killed my brother, Winter said softly. Him and a group of others. Keebly looked sad at that. You're going through all this to avenge your brother? You're a good brother, he said, something off in his voice. Winter looked down. He really wasn't. Look, Keebly said a minute later. Hyena's dead, but you don't need him to take you to Vulture. I know what city he claimed, and it won't be hard to find him there. Winter's head snapped up. Are you mad? He demanded. You just told me Vulture is actively sending assassins after you. Keebly grinned, looking more like his usual self. Well, yeah, he agreed easily. But I do need to relocate, and he'd definitely never expect me to hide in Zeros. Yeah, Winter growled, because it would be the dumbest possible idea. Keebly beamed at him and had the audacity to wink. Guys, I had so much fun talking about these guys. They're the most aggravating ever to each other, and I love writing them. Their story will continue, eventually, with a part 2 about them taking on Vulture and his Talons of Power, so stay tuned for that. As always, thanks for watching, and have a blessed day.